I know what's gone on previously in my previous prison sentences. I wrote a letter to my wife, and it was a detailing letter. Yeah.
You all right? It's all right. This is a letter to your wife from prison. What did you say?
To make sure they understood why I do what I do. And it's me believing that the worst will come.
That you will die in jail.
The worst will come, and I want my children to know that I haven't,
Tommy Robinson, real name Stephen Yaxley Lennon, has been charged under the Terrorism Act.
He hugged supporters waiting outside for him, telling them he was there for telling the truth. Now, one of them asked what'll happen next, and he said, "I'll see what happens, mate. I don't expect to come back out here."
You cannot win a democratic mandate by censoring your opponents or putting them in jail. Whether that's the leader of the opposition, a humble Christian praying in her own home, or a journalist trying to report the news. Nor can you...
Donald Trump is never one to stay silent, and this time he's speaking out on the shocking claims made by Tommy Robinson from behind bars. Kier Starmer likely saw his Munich speech as a defining moment, an opportunity to assert himself as a strong leader capable of restoring Britain's global standing, but instead of gaining respect, he faced an unexpected blow. In front of world leaders, the US Vice President's response didn't just push back, it laid bare a tough truth he couldn't overlook.
His administration.
Well, I heard his speech, and I tell you, you're talking about JD's speech, right?
Yes, sir.
I heard his speech, and he talked about freedom of speech, and I think it's true in Europe. They're losing their wonderful right of freedom of speech. I see it. I mean, I thought he made a very good speech.
This wasn't just a speech that fell flat. It was a reality check, a clear indication that, under Starmer, Britain's influence could be waning. His leadership isn't as firm as he projects, and even key allies are starting to question his direction. When Kier Starmer took the stage in Munich, his goal was clear: to reinforce Britain's standing as a global leader under his watch. He spoke with confidence about democracy, international cooperation, and the UK's commitment to global stability. He stressed the importance of strengthening ties with European allies, tackling security challenges, and keeping Britain at the forefront of shaping the world's future.
That just come out of jail after 13 months had been encouraging his missus to behead her parents because they were kafar, non-believers. He spent 30 months in jail. He'd been encouraging and promoting ISIS terrorism. And they knew he was still a danger and a threat. That's why he was monitored 24 hours a day. He's only out of jail 2 days before he went and tried to kill people. Why has he been let out of jail? When we start treating these men, don't put them in prison with car thieves or violent offenders or drug dealers, because they're a whole new level. They are foreign fighters, enemy combatants at war with us. No amount of your pathetic de-radicalisation bullshit programmes that you put them on in prison changes their mind. They are followers of Muhammad. They are inflicting what he has told them to, backed up by scripture. This actual terrorist who just went on his killing spree, do you know what he actually said before he went to jail, when he got last sent to prison? He said that we can rape Yazidi women because it commands us to in the Quran. Now you all scratch your heads as to why 90% of grooming gang convictions are Muslim men. You know, we're not even allowed to ask the question if it's linked to scripture. Do you know how infuriating it is? And it's infuriating innocent people again.
But here's the problem. Talk is easy. Starmer painted a picture of a strong and confident Britain, but his leadership at home tells a different story. He wanted to show he could work with world leaders, yet many are already questioning whether he can actually deliver. At the conference, the focus was on security, typically meaning external threats. Military leaders filled the room, and the Trump administration made its position clear. While committed to European security and a fair resolution to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Europe must take greater responsibility for its own defense. But the greatest threat to Europe isn't Russia, China, or any foreign power. What's most alarming is Europe's own drift away from its core values.
So it doesn't matter. The British people are always going to thrive. They're always going to win out. And the more tyranny you put against them, the more backlash you're going to feel as the government. God bless Tommy Robinson. Free Tommy Robinson today.
Starmer presented himself as a bridge builder, aiming to mend ties with Europe after Brexit. But does he have the clout to make it happen? Can he persuade the world that Britain remains a major player when his own country is grappling with economic struggles, social unrest, and growing restrictions on free speech? This speech was meant to be a defining moment, a chance for Starmer to prove that Britain still commands influence on the global stage. Instead, it raised more doubts than confidence. His vision may have sounded promising, but when put to the test, it clashed with the harsh reality of his leadership.
Those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible, they're not interested in victims. They're interested in themselves. Those who are cheerleading Tommy Robinson, not interested in justice. They're supporting a man who went to prison for nearly collapsing a grooming case, a gang grooming case. These are people who are trying to get some kind of vicarious thrill from street violence that people like Tommy Robinson promote. And those attacking Jess Phillips, who I'm proud to call a colleague and a friend, not protecting victims. Jess Phillips has done 1,000 times more than they've even dreamt about when it comes to protecting victims of sexual abuse throughout her entire career. And so just as I took on the criminal justice system and the institutions when I was chief prosecutor, I'm prepared to call out this for what it is. We've seen this playbook many times, whipping up of intimidation and threats of violence.
As the US Vice President responded, it became clear that Starmer's carefully crafted message wasn't hitting its mark. Instead of exuding strength, he came across as a leader grasping at an image that no longer reflects the realities of his government. When Starmer wrapped up his speech, he may have anticipated a routine diplomatic nod or polite acknowledgement. Instead, he was met with something far more damaging. An unexpected public challenge that caught him off guard. On an international stage, the Vice President didn't just push back, they exposed the gap between Starmer's rhetoric and Britain's actual standing.
Hoping that the media will amplify it. Now, Jess Phillips does not need me or anybody else to speak on her behalf. But when the poison of the far right leads to serious threats to Jess Phillips and others, then in my book, a line has been crossed. I enjoy the cut and thrust of politics.
This wasn't just a minor policy disagreement. It was a direct contradiction that shattered the image Starmer had carefully built. Whether it was about the UK's global influence, its stance on free speech, or its role in international security, the Vice President's response made one thing clear. They weren't convinced. The message was undeniable. Under Starmer's leadership, Britain wasn't as strong, stable, or influential as he claimed. The room fell silent. Some diplomats exchanged knowing glances, others quickly jotted down notes, and a few looked genuinely taken aback by the bluntness of the response. This wasn't just an awkward moment, it was a public embarrassment. When the leader of a key ally openly questions your credibility, it doesn't just bruise your reputation, it weakens your influence on the global stage. Starmer may have tried to downplay the exchange, but the damage was already done. This wasn't just an uncomfortable moment, it was a clear sign that world leaders lack confidence in his leadership. If the US Vice President was willing to challenge him so openly, one can only imagine what's being said behind closed doors.
At this point I know what they're going to do, yeah. What I believe they're going to do, and that I know no one can tell me why I was brought to that prison only. Yeah. No one can tell me. So I know intentionally, and previously I've been locked in rooms with Muslims in prison, so I believe that, and then in that first week in the...
What was meant to be Starmer's defining moment, a chance to assert his strength on the international stage, ended with him appearing unprepared, vulnerable, and completely out of his depth. He wants to be seen as a strong global leader, but doubts about his leadership are mounting both at home and abroad. His biggest challenge? Convincing the world that Britain still stands as a defender of democracy, while his own government tightens restrictions on basic freedoms.
An irreversible path for Ukraine to NATO membership.
And you have backed away from that, to be absolutely clear.
No, obviously nobody was expecting that to be immediate. It was a pathway over time. But
Under Starmer's leadership, free speech in the UK is under growing threat. Laws are being weaponised to suppress dissenting voices. Individuals have been arrested for silent prayer. Social media users are being targeted by police for so-called hateful content. And new censorship laws have given the government more power to silence opposing views. This isn't just a domestic issue, it's a diplomatic concern. Britain has long been a champion of free expression and open debate, but under Starmer, it's beginning to resemble a surveillance state, and world leaders are noticing, and not in a good way.
Connected. And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds.
Starmer can talk about democracy all he wants, but actions speak louder than words. Right now, his actions paint a different picture. Britain is no longer the strong, free nation it once was. He wants to project the image of a capable and decisive leader, but behind the scenes, allies are already questioning whether the UK under his leadership can still be trusted as a serious global player. Starmer, who has been criticised over his leadership in dealing with immigration and other urgent issues, was challenged again over his capacity to provide Britain with a good representation. His critics only used to point out how he lacked the power to summon respect from strategic allies. Unlike his disdain for Starmer, Trump is well known to have held a united rhetoric equal to outspoken affection for Nigel Farage, the populist and nationalist Trump supporter and Brexit advocate. Farage could not be further from Clinton's liberal internationalism. Their relationship depicts Trump's penchant for sticking with leaders who think like him and are not squeamish about embracing their convictions.
Quite critical of you.
Well, I'm going to see him in about an hour, so I have to be nice, right? But I actually think he's very nice. I think he ran a great race. He did very well. It's very early, but he's popular, and I'll be seeing him, and I'll send you regards.
Courtesy of his stands, whenever Trump was campaigning for the presidency, he was well and warmly placed by Trump. Starmer's critical attitude to Trump, on the other hand, produced a division that appeared to be irreversible. It was not just a simple rejection of Starmer, supported by Trump politically, or the refusal to attend a meeting when Trump has clearly stated as much. It is also focused on the rising gap between nationalist individualism and globalization. By refusing to include Starmer in such a crucial meeting, Trump not only strengthened the perception of him as an anti-conventional decision-maker who uses his own rules,
and his government can be more than student politicians by asking the Speaker to extend. Can they show that they can be more than student politicians?
Order. Mr. Perkins, I don't need to anymore. Your voice carries, it's like mine, too loud.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister show that he and his government can be more than student politicians by asking you, Mr. Speaker, to extend an invitation to President Trump to...
This decision also served as a warning to other global leaders to stay in the President's good graces. They need to align themselves with Trump's agenda or be removed. It is again a highly risky move for which Trump has carved a niche for himself as an alternative in global politics. But Starmer has more problems besides Trump. His leadership is facing increasing backlash over several decisions. One of the most divisive issues is immigration. Critics argue that Starmer has prioritised immigrants over British citizens, which has sparked resentment among voters who feel neglected. This perception has fueled a growing sense of disillusionment among the public. Promises made during Starmer's campaign to rebuild trust, prioritise citizens and ensure transparency are now under question, casting doubt on his ability to deliver on his commitments and regain public confidence. These problems, compounded with his difficulty in recovering from the diplomatic snub, are creating cleavages that the public is noticing within the Labour Party. The UK was once a dominant force in world affairs, shaping international policy and standing firm in its principles. Under Starmer, that influence is fading fast. Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates like this.